What's up, guys? We are back with another Super 7 Ultimates review, and we are jumping into a new wave of figures. We're taking a look at the new direction for Toxic Crusaders, and we're going to start with Toxie, of course. So we've had a handful of Toxies so far. We've had one before we even had Ultimates. We had them when they were called deluxe figures, and then we've had two others since then. But this is going in a little bit of a different direction because we're getting, cartoon, Playmates toy kind of thing. So we're getting stuff that's not just Toxie this time around, but we're going to start with the man himself. So we've got Toxie here, and he comes in a very, very 90s, brightly colored style package. So you've got the Toxic Crusaders logo on the slipcover with this crazy color scheme. There's also a as seen on screen call out because I assume as seen on TV is trademarked by someone, so they couldn't use that. Pop that slipcover off, of course, and you've got your figure there in the window. And this is very familiar territory for me because we've seen this guy a few times, but he's different in many ways as well. So you got him there in the window, and then we've got this very radioactive caution-themed packaging for the inner box, and then on the back there is like a big caution warning plate like you would see on like a semi-truck or something like that, warning you to not buy toys. So yeah, let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package. Our Ultimates Toxic Crusaders Toxie. This is what, the fourth one that we've gotten at this point. And this one is, of course, different. It's not just a repaint. This kicks off the actual cartoon line that Super 7 is trying to do. And this is built upon the same figure that we've already gotten. But he has a new head sculpt. Some of the accessories are a little bit different. And of course, this is a new colorway, if you want to really call it that. Color palette is entirely different, but similar to that very first figure that we got, because of course the first figures of Toxie were built upon the idea that they're just recreating the Playmates figure, and this is pretty similar to that, but it's also meant to be a cartoon representation as well. So let's see if this guy can do, see how he moves around, if you're maybe not familiar with that first figure, because this is literally that first figure. And it's pretty obvious when you look at it as well, because he still has pins. So in many ways, this is an early Ultimates kind of figure. Back when, that original Toxie wasn't actually called an Ultimates. It was one of the deluxe figures before Ultimates really went nuts. So if anything, this is very much in line with a Motu Classics figure. And of course, that works for me. For better or worse, that works for me. So we got a head that is really, really locked down, unfortunately. It's kind of like the one area that I wish was different on this figure. He really just swivels. Arms go out at the shoulders. They swivel. You've got your bicep swivel. We've got single jointed elbows. They're pinned, but they are 90-degree elbows. You got hinges. You got rotation at that wrist. Normal stuff there. We got an ab crunch. He doesn't really go backwards too much, but he goes forwards a good bit. And then you've got a waist twist down here too. Everything's kind of tight, but not in the sense that like I'm worried about it. Like I'm really moving this around for like the first time right now because I'm so familiar with this figure. It's not new. Legs go out about yay far. They kick forward about that far. There you go. Swivel backwards a little bit. You do have your thigh twist up there. Single jointed knees. And these are very Motu Classics knees for sure. Just based on how they're constructed. Almost 90, but not exactly. There is a boot cut that's hidden really, really well at those bandages. And then you've got really nice rocker. And you've got hinges that are also pretty solid down there too. So he is, if you're familiar with Classics, you know what to expect. If you're familiar with the earlier Toxies, any of the three that we've gotten so far, you know what to expect here. The only real issue that I have is that his head really can't do a whole lot, but otherwise he moves just fine for the kind of figure he is. It's very much an articulation scheme that I still enjoy. Now, as far as the visuals here, this is still a kind of figure that I really like, because this still does go back to the Playmates Toxic Crusaders toy line. And of course, it also still is reminiscent of the show, obviously. The show was really gross too, but the toy line was also super, super nasty, and it was one of those Playmates things. Turtles, Toxic Crusaders, they very much look like they can be part of the exact same line, but he's super, super nasty. It's a very late 80s, early 90s kind of toy thing where everything had to be gross and everything had to be nasty, and I still very much like it. And this is, again, this is a lot of reuse. There's really no other way to describe it. It's a lot of reuse. I'm sure it's, 90% the same figure. But it still looks really good. Like, this still looks very similar to the Playmates figure. And it also still looks really similar to the cartoon based on the virtue of having this head sculpt. Because the Playmates figure was pretty close to the show. It was just kind of grosser, if that makes any sense. And I'll bring the Playmates style Ultimates in. So this is the first one here that we got God, I don't even know how long ago this was. 5 years ago? 4 years ago? Something like that? 4 years maybe? Before Ultimates, again, before Ultimates really kicked off, this is what we got first. So you can see overwhelmingly this is the same figure. It's almost the same colors. They're just a different palette. So you've got, you know, more muted colors. He's not as deep green. He's got a less fluorescent shirt. The tutu is a little bit of a different color. He's got different color pants. He has some paint accents on the boils and pustules that are popping out of his body. And little things like the sweatbands and the wraps and the boots, they're different. But the sculpt is the same. And I still really like this figure. I was so happy with this guy when he first came out. All I wanted was more. So I'm really happy that we are getting, you know, a full wave. Brian Flynn has said that there is more in the works, but they haven't really figured out how to slot them in yet. So hopefully we'll get more stuff. Hopefully these do well, because I think for folks who have some nostalgia for this show like I do, you know, I didn't really have the toys as a kid. I think I had a Toxie, and that was about it. But I really remember the show. And it was, you know, it was one of those things. Turtles, Toxic Crusaders, they kind of went together. They had the same kind of toys, so it was definitely right up my alley. And it's really cool to see these two next to each other because they are very similar. I don't think that's a negative. But that head sculpt really differentiates the two, especially with this slight color palette swap. So everything is just a little bit different on the new figure versus the old. But I do really like this head sculpt. It is, I don't know if slightly less gross is the best way to say it, because it's still pretty nasty and he is incredibly deformed. But the actual Playmates head that we got on the first Ultimates is definitely a little bit nastier. Looks a little bit more Toxic Avenger-ish, if that makes any sense too. You know, this of course coming out of that film, which is certainly not for kids, but it got a cartoon and a toy line anyway. But I think this really looks good. Paint is great. Sculpt is really good. I wish it maybe had a little bit of shading on some of the leg boils down there, but otherwise I'm really happy with it. The face looks good. It's very cartoony. It's very animated, and it's going to go along really well if you've got the other 3 Toxies. Now, as far as some size comparisons go, we're going to start with another Ultimate, and then we'll get, you know, into other lines as well. We've got Ultimates Leo, the glow-in-the-dark here on the right, and this, of course, shows size comparison between the Turtles and Toxie, because Toxie is still, like I've said, he's built on the Motu Classics framework. That first figure came fresh on the heels of Super 7, having been doing Motu Classics, so it was, you know, in their wheelhouse, 4 Horsemen stuff. And then we've got one of the Premium DNA Battletoads. This is Zitz over here. Let's pull Leo aside. We'll do a Hasbro figure and kind of knock that out. So there is Classified Scrap Iron. Let's pull our Toad aside, and here is a Mythic Legions. There is Keltis. Of course, they're very comparable. Let's pull Scrap Iron aside. Let's do a NECA figure, and this one is still fresh. So here is the Dungeons and Dragons Strongheart, rather. Let's pull Keltis aside, and let's do a Figuarts. Here is Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta from Dragon Ball GT. And then one more random, just for a smaller thing. Here is a Super 7 Reaction Putty, just for something super tiny by comparison. So again, he is going to be fairly in line with anything 7-inch scale. You know, this guy kind of scales high for 7-inch stuff, but he's going to look really good alongside Motu Classics and pretty much anything Super 7 NECA has done. And then he's going to look kind of big and hulking alongside normal 112. Now, as far as accessories goes, Toxie comes with basically the same stuff that we've seen with the other 3 so far. And I'm not too surprised about that. There's not a whole lot that really needs to be given to him from a cartoon perspective, I don't think. And this is still basically the Playmates figure reimagined into an Ultimates, just with a cartoon head and paint job. So he does come with essentially all the same stuff, but there are a few changes, and it's mostly colorway things. So to start with, we do get some extra heads. We've got the more toy-inspired head here on him with the bandana, and then of course you also get the one without the bandana, which is, you know, going to be maybe a little bit more movie-like. So you get 2 different heads to accomplish 2 different things in that way, and then you got the third for the more animation style. We get a couple extra hands, so you get some gripping hands on them in the box. We get a set of 2 relaxed hands, and then we get a set of fists, so you get 6 total hands. We get the signature weapon for Toxie. We get his American flag emblazoned mop. And this one is pretty nice. I really like the fade on this sort of cream to green colorway. You don't have to use the American flag if you don't want to do that. This thing is pretty heavy, and it's always been because it's super solid. So you've got the mop, and then you've got the attachable flag, which I just really like. It's a very vintage toy thing to have that in particular. I always remember the sticker peeling off on mine. We get his shield, which is another signature accessory. So it's like a slime thing with the Toxic Crusaders logo on it. Of course, that's a very toy thing. And then the back is like a sewer pipe for a handle. And this can be stored on his back if you want to. He's got a little port back there. And then you get his radiation ooze grenade. So you get a set of 3 of these. We've got a bunch of these already. I like them. I'm not the biggest fan of using them because inevitably I always knock them off because they go on the strap here. But these look really good. They're fully painted up. A lot of detail on them that maybe the other ones don't have. Out of the dozen that I now have, those are probably the best. But the coolest accessory that he has is Blobby. And of course, he's been up there this whole time now. So this is a very cartoony Blobby. And it of course will sit on the peg on his shoulder. So you've got an option to store Blobby on him at all times. But this one is much, much different from the others. The others are very toy inspired. This is specifically an animation Blobby. So he's bright pinky, purplish color. He's got the oddly sized eyes, and he's got this mouth. He's always screaming. So he's got a fully open, painted mouth. You can even see the uvula hanging down back there. There's a lot of detail inside that mouth, actually. But I really like him just by virtue of the fact that it's not the same one, just repainted pink. It is an entirely different sculpt that really plays up the idea of what he looked like in the show, and will go along really well with this head sculpt in particular. So he does have a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of good accessories. A lot of it is still, again, very Playmates toy inspired, but it all works really nicely here. And what he does have is kind of tailored in some ways to the colors of the show. But it's all about that Blobby for me because it really makes him even more interesting to have something a little bit more cartoony on his shoulder than the same thing we've gotten 3 times over. So yeah, overall, really happy with Toxie. I'm really happy in particular that this has become a thing, that we are seemingly going forward with Toxic Crusaders Ultimates. I hope that this picks up, because there are some wacky, weird designs that Super7 can easily just sort of nail based on their track record with this kind of stuff. But there's a lot going into this one for me in particular. There's a nostalgia level that is immediately taken care of just by virtue of this head sculpt, and then the connotations of the Playmates connection, the Motu Classic style connection when it comes to the body style and construction. I know it's ancient, but I still love it. It's a huge thing for me in terms of toy collecting. And then just, they nailed this. Like, they really did a good job with this one. The sculpt is good. The paint is good. Comes with some really solid accessories. I like some of the few things that have been changed here on this figure to make him cartoon, like Blobby in particular. Absolutely love it. And it's just a solid figure. There's a reason why we've gotten so many of these. People must be buying them. And I hope to see more. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super7 Ultimates Toxic Crusaders Toxie. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And until next time.